Welcome to the Shameless Plug, a podcast about climate, energy, and most of all, about electrification. It's a new podcast hosted by me, Saul Griffith, and my mate, Fiona Whitelaw, and we're going to get to the nuts and bolts of electrifying your life. On today's episode, we have Karl Jensen. I have occasionally said that nobody has an emotional relationship with their hot water heater, so it shouldn't matter whether it runs on gas or electricity. Karl might be the one individual who's so passionate about hot water heating that he might have a passionate relationship with water heater. Today we're going to talk to him about all things heat pump and water heating and how it can change your life in very comfortable and money-saving ways. Here we are for another episode of the Shameless Podcast. Today we're going to be talking to Karl Jensen. He is passionate about hot water heaters. One of the very important aspects of electrifying your life, getting to zero emissions, is the water heater. I have been known to say out loud that people love their cars. Really, they sweat the decision on which one they want. People really care about what their cooktop looks like. But nobody has an emotional relationship to water heaters, but I think Karl might be the one guy who truly loves them, and he's here to give us his wisdoms today. Thanks, Karl.
I don't know that it's that much of a big deal, but the competing product is gas, and I don't have a gas well in my backyard, so I had to come up with a better plan.
I like that. I guess I did try. I almost made it sound a little too intimate, your relationship with water heaters. So to step back there from that, let's just maybe start with for the average person who probably, even if they looked at their water heater, doesn't know how it works or what it is. Do you want to just describe for us all the types of water heaters that may be in basements or in garages or on the pad outside the house in Australia for us?
Yep, perfect. Let's start with electric storage. Typical household that uses 4,000 kilowatt hours a year. Next is gas storage. Gas storage uses around 5,000 kilowatt hours a year. And then there's instant gas. Instant gas, we managed to put a fan in there so that we could make that raging inferno really hot in a small space and not need a tank anymore. And that one uses again, close to 5,000 kilowatt hours a year for a typical household of 4 people.
When you say storage, what do you mean? And when you say inline, what do you mean? What do they look like? Describe the machine for us.
Good question. So a gas storage unit would have a tank, typically somewhere between 140 and 250 litres. And then for an electric tank would typically be much larger than that, would be, say, 250 to 400 litres of hot water. Next one would be a solar thermal. That would have a flat plate or an evacuated tube collector on the roof, and it could either be close coupled with a tank on the roof, that's the old solar heart, or it could have a tank on the ground and a pump to circulate the water, which is sort of a more modern concept, just so that it's less ugly on the roof. And then, of course, the most modern and energy efficient of them all is the heat pump, and that comes in generally 2 flavours. One that's all in one, and the other that is split, so it has a separate compressor and a tank.
So the all-in-one, that's the one with the little top hat where the business end of the heat pump is, and the split one looks like a rectangular box on the ground and a water tank cylinder on its end. Is that right?
Yep, sounds good.
Is it true that your hot water is the biggest thing that takes the most energy in your house, that you spend the most energy on?
Very good question. I read this just this morning that 25% of Australia's generating capacity is used domestically, and the figures are somewhere around 30% of that domestic energy is used for heating water. So the gas figures, of course, would be separate to that because no one's really counting the megajoules of gas that are being used to heat water in Australia's generation capacity. So 30%, I'd say at least another 40%, 50% of domestic energy is used for heating spaces, and then the balance is used for watching the internet.
And by domestic, you mean household?
Households, yeah, households.
All right, so maybe 6% of our electricity is used for heating our water.
Yeah, which is completely nuts, because we could reduce that by 3/4. And if we boil it down to the hard maths.
Oh, I sell you what you did there. Boil it down.
Yeah, very funny. Indeed. If we boil it down to the hard maths, there's 10 million hot water heaters. Sorry, there's 11.7 million hot water heaters in Australia right now, one in every house. And out of that, we've got about 1.7 million solar thermal or heat pumps. And then we've got 5 million gas ones and 5 million electric ones. Those 10 million combined using 8 kilowatt hours a day more energy than a heat pump. So that's a lot of zeros in carbon emissions going up the chimney that are really easy to get. You know, we're not talking small amounts of energy. We're talking $600 billion worth of nuclear power stations just to heat water. You know, it's crazy stuff. And of course, Queensland the other day had a wind project that was cancelled. And people say, oh, we don't need wind, we need to do this. What we need to do is just put in some heat pumps.
So then you must, overnight, the Victorian government announced that they're going to phase out gas for these appliances in people's homes, and they're going to help people never buy another gas water heater. That must sound like good news to you.
The schemes in Victoria are exceptional. We've already got a Solar Victoria rebate for $1,000, which anyone that earns less than $210,000 and has a house less than 3 million is eligible for. We've got a Victorian Energy Upgrade Scheme, which provides around 8 Veeks, and a Veek's worth at least $60. So call that $500. And then the STC scheme, which is the same scheme that people get rebates on their solar panels. That's worth a different amount in each state, but in Victoria it's worth 19. New South Wales, the climate's a bit warmer, so the heat pump uses a little bit less energy. It's 18 there, and in Queensland it's 17 again, using a little bit less energy in Queensland because it's warmer.
So put those numbers in perspective for me for a Victorian. So how much does a heat pump water heater cost, and if you stack all those incentives, how much will it cost?
So if we stack the rebates, the cheapest heat pump that you should be able to get is $1,000, so that Solar Victoria needs you to be $1,000 out of pocket for them to contribute the $1,000. So even the cheapest heat pumps are typically $1,000. The problem with that is sometimes you can get some really low performance heat pumps, and like any rebate scheme, we encourage people to find the least expensive products that they possibly can, and they aren't looking for the longevity of the product. They're looking for a product that lives its warranty.
So what you're saying is not all heat pumps are created equal.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that it can be boiled down simply enough to, there's 3 general sizes. A low powered heat pump makes 2 kilowatts of heating power from the heat pump, has about 450 watts of input power. The next size up makes about 2.7 kilowatts of heating power. So obviously that's a fair amount more. And then the high powered heat pumps have got 4 kilowatts of heating power. I think that that reheat time is important for the number of people that are in the house. So if I've only got 2 people in the house, that low powered heat pump is fine. It'll live about a decade or more. If I have the 2.7 kilowatt heat pump, it'll suit 3 people. And then if I have the larger heat pump, it'll suit 4 people. The question that I get asked quite often is, well, why don't I get a bigger tank? And I say, well, that doesn't help the heat pump live a longer life. So if I put in a 300 litre tank with a 2 kilowatt heating capacity, it can take 9 hours to heat that tank in winter, and we just don't have 9 hours of sun. So I've got no chance of being able to heat that tank of water with my own solar.
So let me get this straight. I think you just gave us two good reasons to get a more powerful heat pump. First one is because it won't be pushed as hard, meaning you're not flogging it. It's not like you're not full pedal to the metal every day. It's going to last longer, so it might last 15 years instead of 10. And then the second reason I heard you say, and maybe you can go into both of these, was that if, for example, I have rooftop solar, I'm going to want to pump all the heat in when that rooftop solar is cheap in the middle of the day, or even just if I'm buying electricity from the grid. I want to pump it in quickly, and you can pump it in twice as fast with the bigger system. Is that right?
Exactly. So I think it's just like driving a car down the road. So, customer A says, I've never had a problem with my car and I've done 50,000 Ks in a year. In 5 years. And the next guy says, well, I'm driving for Uber and I did 200,000 Ks this year and I had a whole heap of problems. The more you operate a machine, the less time it lives in calendar life. So hot water systems aren't created equally. So the next thing is, of course, the volume of the tank in that needs to be enough for the people in the house. So in summertime, it's really easy. I've only got to heat the water from 20 degrees to 40 degrees for you to have a comfortable shower. That's pretty easy. I can do that with a piece of hose put in the sun. But wintertime, I've got to heat the water from 10 to 50. So all the losses of all the pipe work, all the pieces of brass, the taps, the fittings, the shower head, everything is a loss in the system, and all of those losses are much more significant in winter because it's cold. So now I've got to put 40 degrees of temperature into that water for you to have a comfortable shower. So of the energy use that I have to heat the water over the course of the year, 2/3 of it happens in winter and 1/3 happens in summer. And of course, my solar system is making 3 times less energy in winter than it is in summer. So if I was trying to heat my water with a resistive electric element that used 4 times more energy, now I'm trying to put twice as much energy into the water, and I need 4 times more of it than a heat pump, and my solar system's only performing at 30% of the capacity that it does in summertime.
While you were talking, it kind of made me think about using your hot water system like a battery in a way. And so, if you imagine, so firstly, imagine I know nothing, shouldn't be too hard, but imagine, I'm living in a medium-sized Australian house in the suburbs in like Sydney, and I've got, 2 children at home and a partner, so there's 2 adults and 2 children. And I'm thinking to myself, New South Wales government is making some nice noises about home batteries, or, I'm thinking maybe I'll get a home battery. But now you're talking, I'm thinking maybe I should just put all of the excess, power essentially that I'm making off the solar panels on my roof, which I've had for, quite some time. Maybe I should just put that into hot water and kind of use that essentially just to offset, to bring my bills down. Do you hear people say stuff like that? Do you advise people, who have questions like that?
Yeah, Fiona, the problem is that in wintertime, when our water heating demand is double, that solar system isn't making as much energy. And you need that energy for heating your house, and you need that energy for charging your electric car. So by the time I add up all of those demands with a resistive electric hot water service, you've run out of roof a long time ago to install enough solar. So unfortunately,
you used the caveat there. So you're saying it might be a good idea, but there's a difference if you have a heat pump as opposed to just a resistive heater, right?
Yeah, we're talking 4 times more energy. So a heat pump, you're putting, say, 3 or 4 kilowatt hours into it, as opposed to 12 to 16 kilowatt hours into your electric resistance element type hot water service. Down here in Victoria, winter yield, June and July, from a solar system is just 1.5 kilowatts per kilowatt of panels on the roof. So a typical house that has a 6.6 kilowatt solar system, it's only making 10 kilowatt hours a day. That's not enough just to heat their water, let alone heating their house or charging their electric car as well.
And so this is the magic of the heat pump. People ask me all the time because they think I'm some kind of expert. Tell me how a heat pump works, and I go into the second law of thermodynamics and all this other stuff. But it's super not intuitive. I want you to make it completely obvious to the average Australian. What is the magic genie inside the bottle of a heat pump? How does it work?
All it does is move energy from A to B. So it harvests energy from the air with a radiator and a fan, and that radiator and a fan is below the ambient temperature, so it can take energy out of that air, and then it puts it into the water. So instead of being like a split system air conditioner where there's another radiator inside and a fan, that radiator that would normally be inside and on your wall blowing warm air is simply wrapped around the outside of the tank. So we're only using a small amount of energy to move the energy from outside to inside.
So a little bit of electricity takes a lot of heat out of air, even if the air is cold, and it puts that heat into the hot water and spits out even colder air. Is that right?
Exactly. So someone asked me the other day, why are heat pumps so expensive versus, say, buying an electric hot water service and buying a 2.5 kilowatt split system? And I said, well, there's a number of considerations here. One, not only do I've got to heat the tank, or the water in the tank, I've got to heat the tank itself, so that the tank in a typical water heater weighs 90 or 100 kilos. So even if I assume that it takes the same amount of energy to lift that steel by the same amount as the water, it means that the coefficient of performance that I'm getting out of my hot water heat pump is absolutely outstanding, simply because I've got to heat all of that steel as well. So when I look at the spec sheet, it says that, for example, the iStore gets a coefficient of performance of 4.82. So every 1 kilowatt hour of energy I throw at it, I get 4.82 kilowatt hours worth of heat into the water. But it misses the fact that I needed to heat up 30% more than just the water. I needed to heat that steel up as well. So just amazing technology. I sort of cottoned on when I read your book, give or take 4 years ago. You said, we've got the technology now. And of course, the typical pushback on heat pumps was, it's an immature technology. But my grandma had a wall type air conditioner 45 years ago. So there's nothing new about the technology. We're just using it for a different application.
All right, so there's a bunch of things going on in there. I want to pick on, when did you personally get into the heat pump hot water business?
I've been doing it now for 3 years. So prior to that, I was in the renewable energy industry as a wholesaler, selling inverters and solar panels and racking. And at the end of the day, the uptake of solar in Australia has been excellent to date, and we can reduce someone's energy demand from the grid typically by about a third. So the other 2/3 of the energy from their solar system, they haven't been able to utilise. They haven't been at home to use that energy, or the energy sources that the appliances that they had in their house were the wrong ones. So I can put 50 kilowatts of solar panels on the roof. It doesn't help me make hot water if I've got a gas thing burning away to make my hot water. So getting better utilisation out of the assets that we've already bought, well, that 35% of Australians have already bought, makes great economic sense.
So this wasted solar is called curtailment. Do you have gross numbers on how much we let go to waste?
It hasn't been going to waste. Other people have been using it. So instead of me using my own solar, my neighbours who didn't have solar would have used it and would have been generally consumed in my neighbourhood. And we haven't seen much in the way of local curtailment until the advent of larger grid limits, which allowed us to connect, say, 10 kilowatt inverters to single phase houses instead of 5. And that's only happened in recent times. They've allowed us to do that. However, most of them have had at least in the last 2 years, have had an export limit of 5 kilowatts. So the most that we could ever export to the grid would be 5 kilowatts. And of course, as time's gone on, the value of that energy to other parts of the energy network has become less and less because there's been more of those renewables available.
You just said there's a 5 kilowatt limit on what you can export. Is that right?
Single phase house, most of Australia, we're slowly getting into flexible exports now, which would allow a larger than 5 kilowatt export limit.
Yeah.
That said, it has significant challenges for the network simply because the overhead connection or the underground connection to someone's house just might not be big enough. And the more energy I try and push to the grid, the higher the grid voltage becomes. So I might hit a barrier of running out of available grid voltage. So that limits to 153 volts. And after that, I have to start turning my inverter output down. So I just might not have enough cable to go to the street to export large amounts of power.
Didn't know there was a limit.
The power company limits it, particularly so in Western Australia, the logic was we want enough network capacity or hosting capacity, they call it, for everybody to have the opportunity to have a solar system. We don't want people that have got lots of money to put a big solar system on so that their neighbour can't put anything on. And historically, that hosting capacity has been as simple as around 30% of the transformer capacity. But now that we've got more experience with our network and adding more and more renewables, that isn't so much a hard limit, but it's something that the network operator is prepared to have a discussion around. And by limiting the export to 5 kilowatts per site and allowing a larger inverter, at least then the customer can meet more of their energy demands over the course of the year. So summertime got more energy than we can use in our own home. Wintertime don't have anything like enough energy, so we need as many panels on the roof as we can. Curtailment isn't a dirty word. And the simplest explanation there is if I build an off-grid system for someone's house, it has to be able to meet their heaviest demands at a time when they're generating the least amount of energy. And then any other time from that, it doesn't matter what I do with, I just don't generate the energy.
And another way of saying that is rooftop solar is so extraordinarily cheap in Australia that you should design for your winter loads, and then you'll be golden.
Assume you'll export.
And you want to use as much of that as you can in your house in winter, but in summer you're going to be making more than you need, and it'll be supporting the rest of the system.
Exactly. So I call that spill. So if we've got a spill of surplus renewables, that's not a problem. They're very easy to curtail. So we can turn down rooftop solar, we can turn down the wind, but in order to substitute coal and gas in winter, that's a challenge. So we used to see on TV summertime, or there could be brownouts because people are using air conditioners, and I wave my hands in the air and say, no. Summer's no problem. We've got heaps of generation and people can absolutely make their own. Where they can't make their own is winter. And of course, if we take gas away, particularly from Victoria, we've got 2 million homes that have got gas hot water and gas, typically ducted gas heating. And to get rid of those two things combined, over the course of a year, we're talking 14,000 kilowatt hours worth of energy goes into their house by a pipe. And the average energy demand somewhere between 4,000 and 6,000 kilowatt hours a year, depending on whose numbers you use.
Okay, so you're just describing that shortfall there between what people use, what they need, and what they can get in the middle of winter.
Yeah, so when we get rid of that enormous amount of energy that we're burning gas for.
Yep.
And if I boil that one down, it's actually an average of 66 kilowatt hours a day that Victorian households use heating water and spaces.
Wow.
For
So much.
for 180 days of the year. So we're talking 43,000 megajoules over 180 days is 66 kilowatt hours a day. And if I assume that my heat pump gets a coefficient of performance of 4, I can divide that 66 by 4, and that's the electricity that I need to use to put into my heat pumps to move that energy from outside to inside.
Those Victorians are too clean.
Oh, they're washing too much?
Dishwasher. Too clean. Yeah.
What you're really saying is Victorians are extraordinary, as all Australians know. What you're actually saying is that the efficiency of heat pumps is so extraordinary that you go from 66 kilowatt hours a day to about 15 or 16 for a Victorian.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's the efficiency we've always been looking for. So talk to me about that efficiency versus stuffing insulation in your attic and double glazing your windows.
Oh, very good one. I love this. So people always say, where should I spend my money first? And I say, look, let's say that all the energy that you put into your house is leaking back out again. All we do by insulating is slow down the rate at which it leaks out. And we might be able to improve that thermal envelope by 100%. But that would leave me with, say, 33 kilowatt hours a day worth of energy instead of 66. And if I put in a heat pump, I could have reduced it by 75% instead of 50%. So even if my house leaks, I still need to heat it. And if I'm heating it with a heat pump, I'm heating it with vastly less energy, external energy input. So even if it leaks, I still have to do it. So I might as well do that first. It's the priority. Mm-hmm. That's quite controversial, by the way. Everyone will say, oh, you need to tighten up your building and you need to stop it leaking before you do any of these things. Mm. And I say, well, yeah, I suppose if we're talking, it's difficult to fill a bucket if the bucket's laying on its side. We'll have to do something, but it is a difficult thing. Where do we spend our money first? And Fiona, you mentioned batteries. For me, a battery makes absolute sense because I can enlarge the size of my solar system way beyond what I could before. So the Office of Renewable Energy Regulator, who determines the rules of how we play the game, says that we can't put more than 33% more solar panels on a inverter without a battery. But if I put a small battery there, I can oversize it as much as the inverter manufacturer allows. So now if I could connect a 10 kilowatt inverter to the grid and have 13.3 kilowatts of panels, that was my limit for a single phase house, and 80% of the East Coast has single phase power. And that 13.5 kilowatt system was adequate for making enough energy for that house's energy demands over the course of the year, but it was a fraction of what they would need in winter. So I need more solar panels on the roof in order to make enough energy for their household in winter. So if I put that small battery on that hybrid inverter, now I can put 20 kilowatts of panels on the roof, and the inverter hasn't got any problem with doing that. It can make 10 kilowatts of AC and 10 kilowatts of DC to charge the battery at the same time. So I haven't actually lost any generation capacity out of that solar system if I could use it all. So that is a cost-effective way of increasing the available array that I have for that person's house. Doing it as a retrofit is a lot harder because the logistics and the costs of getting someone to the house to install that battery and someone to make some retail margin means that even with that new federal battery subsidy, the economics are quite marginal.
That's really interesting, though. I think a lot of people would not know that there's a limit to how much electricity you can generate on your everyday kind of solar setup if you don't have a battery, I think that would come as news to a lot of people.
The problem is that the amount of energy that we actually use. If I look at the ideal scenario, a 13 kilowatt solar system will make 15,000 kilowatt hours a year. Unfortunately, it'll only make 500 in June and July, and my energy demands in my typical Victorian household are double that. So I need to put double the solar array on the roof, and I just wasn't allowed to connect it to the grid before. But if I put a battery in there, now I can put that 20 kilowatts of solar on the roof and make that possible. So I've got a scenario now where someone can meet all of their energy demands with their existing single phase connection. And similarly, we're talking single phase because 80% of the East Coast grid has single phase power, and connecting everybody to three phase power is actually really expensive. We need truck rolls, we need new meters, we need lots of work, we need new switchboards. So that exercise is generally prohibitively expensive.
And when you're saying single phase, that means you got one sine wave coming into your house. Three phase means you got three wires with three sine waves. And so that triples the amount you can bring in or export with three phase compared to single phase.
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of three phase power. If anyone's building a new house, absolutely, it's worth the investment to put on three phase. If for no other reason, you can put on 3 times as much solar, and when you want to use the power from the grid, you can use 3 times as much of it. So, double what it is typically.
It also means if you have three phase, you can operate a plasma cutter in your kitchen, which if you cook like I do, that's kind of a handy thing. But we do have three phase at our place. But you said before there's a limit to what you can generate on your regular roof before you have to put a battery on. If you have three phase to your house, is that limit still the same, or can you put a bigger solar array on and generate more? Is the limit still the same?
It's typically 3 times larger. So
Right.
Instead of being a 5 kilowatt export limit, it's now a 15 kilowatt export limit. Western Australia's just recently changed the rules, and from the 1st of July, it looks like you'll be able to connect a 10 kilowatt inverter to a single phase. So that's taken 15 years to change. And you'll be able to put a 24 kilowatt three phase on the house. And the reason why they limited that is because you're supposed to have a 32 amp three phase circuit breaker as your incoming. And it's difficult, or you can't push more than 8 kilowatts through a 32 amp circuit breaker. So that's the new limit. That said, anytime you go over 5 kilowatts of inverter capacity in Western Australia, you get no feed-in tariff and an export limit of 1.5 kilowatts across the three phases. So a common one that I'm hearing now is you should load up your roof with the largest system that you possibly can. And oftentimes the solar system yield would be less than a 5 kilowatt system, just because they can't use it at the time when they're generating it.
Right.
And that, of course, encourages people to use the federal battery subsidy or rebate and put massive batteries in their garage. So now we're looking at a large house with 30 or more kilowatt hours worth of storage to meet this demand at night that really I don't think is there. So most of the time, people just can't use that much energy at night. What's better for them to do is run their air conditioner during the day, because their house is a giant battery and it stores energy. If it's hot outside, I can move energy from inside the house to outside the house and cool it down. And it's got an enormous amount of thermal mass. So in Western Australia, they built double brick houses with brick internal walls, which means that I could cool the house down all during the day. And when the sun goes down, I can turn the air conditioner off. It's still cold inside because I've turned my house into a fridge with the magic of the reverse cycle air conditioner. And I've used some of that other energy to heat my water with my heat pump. I really and then left with watching TV and watching the internet through my home battery, and it doesn't have to be enormously large and expensive.
Yeah, okay. And I imagine some of those people too would be thinking to themselves, I could put that into the car, put the power into an electric car as well.
Absolutely, a great use for renewable energy is to drive it down the road,
Yeah.
or ride it down the road.
Yeah, just substitute it instead of petrol.
Yeah, so back to the heat pump analogy there. If I'm comparing a heat pump to an electric storage hot water service,
Yeah.
the difference that 8 kWh a day will drive a typical electric vehicle 15,000 kilometres a year. So
That's the average. That's the average amount an Australian drives per year, roughly, right?
Yeah, well, I'm calling that $3,000 worth of petrol any way you look at it. So
Yeah.
by putting a heat pump and an electric car in their driveway, I can save them $3,000. But that 1,500 litres of fuel that it takes to drive those kilometres,
Yeah.
call it 750 litres of petrol to drive that. 5 litres per 100 k's is pretty ambitious. Most cars won't get that. Every car I've ever driven, I've got 10. But let's call it...
We know how you drive.
We know how you drive.
Yeah, look, you drive it as hard as it goes. I don't think that I'm unique like that. Every tradie that I know drives them as hard as they go as well. But somewhere between 5 and 10 litres per 100 k's, all of a sudden, if you take 10 million cars off the road and you run them with rooftop solar and locally generated energy, that's a whole heap of oil that we don't need to buy from foreign countries, and that is a trade deficit or a foreign trade issue that is just an enormous number.
$165 million per day, I heard the number this week, is what we spend on petrol in Australia and oil.
Is that right?
Well, I wonder what proportion of that is trucking versus domestic.
Yeah.
It's about 50-50.
50-50, so you could put $80 million into Australian mum and dad's pockets every day. Cost of living, it's awesome.
Shipping it around as well. Like I always think of those people that live right out, in Western New South Wales who are increasingly putting in large solar arrays because, otherwise you are literally shipping diesel into tanks on your property that you then have to look after and, stop from catching fire every 5 minutes.
Oh, the really good part about that one is people say, I live in a regional area, I can't have an electric car because the petrol station or the charging station's too far away. And so you've got a charging station in your garage, just plug the thing in.
Yeah.
You've already got that infrastructure and the amount of time that you save. So last year, my family and the 3 EVs that we have drove 65,000 kilometres. So if I assume that they go 650 kilometres to a tank, which they didn't, that's a lot of trips to the petrol station. It really is. And that's an enormous amount of time that I'm not spending. Fiona, we talked earlier about the induction cooktop and how much of a game changer that one is in terms of the time that it takes to clean it. So, I'm the chef in my house. If it takes 5 minutes to clean a gas hob and it takes 10 seconds, it's 2 weeks of my life remaining that's wasted cleaning a cooktop. I don't want to spend 2 weeks of my life cleaning a cooktop.
You could be plasma cutting.
Yeah.
I've taken to doing some of my prep on top of the cooktop because it's easier to wipe down the glass than it is to wipe down the chopping board.
My one beeps if you put a damp cloth on it, because I always thought this is great, you can just wipe it clean. But my one does this thing where you touch it with the wet cloth and it goes, don't touch me, don't. And it just does that for like a minute.
I'm hoping with the incredible reach and power of our podcast that the world's appliance makers will listen and they'll make an induction cooktop that doesn't beep at you.
No beeping. You can actually get them rated by how much beeping there is. We bought the least beeping, which is a Bosch, by the way, but it's still, if you touch it, it doesn't want to be touched.
This is the water heater show here. We've got a world expert in water heaters.
Sorry.
Karl, sounds like you're pretty far along in your personal electrification journey.
Yeah.
So I've got 2 questions. walk us through what you electrified, when and how, and what you haven't done yet.
Look, I've had solar on my houses now for the last 15 years. And when people have said we need to electrify, I've sort of said, what do you mean electrify what? Everything's already been done. So I built a new house recently, about 4 years ago. That made all of the decisions very easy. And I asked them to build me an all-electric house and how much extra that would cost. And they said it would be an extra $50,000. And of course, head explodes.
Wow.
Where the hell does $50,000 go? And what they didn't say was building a gas house costs $25,000 more, because when you buy a house, it doesn't actually come with much in it. It doesn't come with many power points. It doesn't come with heating and cooling. You have to pay for all of these things as extra. But they really did a great job of scaring me off, and I didn't build with them because they put this massive number next to being electrified. So I picked a different builder that was building electric homes. They said to me that a 6.6 kilowatt solar system on the roof would make that house zero emissions, and it won't. You need 26.6 kilowatts on the roof.
This is an important point. Most of Australian emissions from the household come from the cars, so if you've got to count those, and I think that's the misleading advertising. They were assuming all you were electrifying was the water in the kitchen, right?
Yeah, well, I wanted to be zero emissions, including building the house. So obviously there's some carbon emissions made from building the house. When I bought my solar system, I sold what's called the STCs. I sold them to someone else. So I sold all of the emissions savings that my house makes out till 2030, which means that all of the emissions that I accumulate between now and 2030, I want to pay back. I want to pay back the cars, the heating, cooling, the hot water, all of those things. And it turns out that with 26.6 kilowatts on the roof, I should hit that net zero number at 2050. And then by that stage, of course, it's all wrecked and I need to buy it all over again. Yeah.
You've got a battery.
I do.
On your house.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So I more important than that battery on the wall is the 200 kilowatt hours worth of batteries that are parked in the driveway.
Right.
They have vastly more value. So the home battery, I call it the cherry on top of the 5-layer all-electric cake. And I need to get all of those other things done first. So all of those other things have a better financial return. And we see governments occasionally promising things that aren't really going to be the case. So the simple one there is when the battery rebate was first announced in WA, they said that a battery would save the average WA home $2,000. And I think it's quite misleading to tell people that it could save them $2,000 when they were only spending $1,500 on their energy in the first place.
Right.
Quite difficult. You have to be able to use it. And you need to be able to use it during peak times when energy is expensive for it to stack up. As soon as we start using it in off-peak time, the maths is quite difficult to stack up.
Sure.
That said, obviously energy prices do increase over time at least the rate of inflation. So, it's a difficult thing to math out because the crystal ball doesn't tell us what that rate's going to be.
I want to ask you a question. I once made a graph for some politicians that claimed that electrification was anti-inflationary, because we know fossil fuels go up and to the right over time and they get volatile when we throw bombs at each other. But if you finance your house, like the one you're in, all electric, you've got pretty much constant interest payments, 20, 30 years into the future. So would you say you are living the anti-inflationary dream?
So I have mathed this out, Saul. So if I exclude the cars that I sold, the number's about $210,000. So I've got a couple of secondhand Teslas, a new Tesla, 5 reverse cycle air conditioners, couple of hot water heat pumps, a couple of 22 kilowatt EVSEs or charging devices to plug the cars in, 26.6 kilowatts of solar system and a home battery. I come in at about 210 grand. That's a lot of money. And if my rate of interest on my mortgage is 5.5%, then for the sake of argument, it costs me $11,000, $12,000 a year in interest. That said, I'm saving about $16,000 in that I'm not buying $10,000 or $11,000 worth of petrol to drive 65,000 Ks. I'm not spending $3,000 on gas, and we do heat a lot of water and we do have a big house. So average Victorian household will spend $2,000, and my house is much bigger than that. So $3,000 worth of gas and $2,000 worth of electricity that I didn't have to buy from the grid. So I reckon I'm around $4,000 a year better off, and that's money in my pocket. Of course, if I have to earn that money, I've got to earn $6,000 or $7,000. So by electrifying everything, I've given myself a pay rise of several $1,000s a year.
No, that's a nice way of looking at it.
But you don't have to do all of those things, and the first electric car makes the biggest difference, because if I had two cars in the driveway before that did 25,000 Ks each, when I buy an electric car, there's a very good chance that it'll do 45,000 Ks and the petrol car will do 5, simply because everybody wants to drive the electric car because it's better and it's cheaper, it's more fun, it's got a better stereo in it, it's got more safety features, all of that fun stuff that goes with buying any new car. So my electric car ends up doing 45,000 Ks in the first year, and people say that's crazy, you barely got out of it. But it wasn't just me that drove it, it was myself and the wife, and we drove it for everything. Helped us reconnect with friends that lived a long way away. My partner's sister lives down in Torquay, and a 3.5 hour round trip drive, no getting past it. It's a $70 exercise in petrol. Now it costs nothing because I just plug the car in when I get home. So you get to or spend time with your friends and family that don't live next door anymore more often. It just costs nothing to do it.
Yeah, so I estimate it's about 2 cents a kilometre electric and about 20 if you're running on petrol. Is that what you would use as a guesstimate?
I cheated because one of the electric cars that I bought had free supercharging for life. And last year I did 65,000 kilometres for $83. So,
wow.
Yeah. That's just crazy because ultimately I used to service my own cars, and I love working on cars. I really do. I'm a motoring enthusiast, and it turns out that I love not working on cars more than I love working on cars. It's much better for the family. When the family says, what are we doing on the weekend? And you say, oh, I'm pulling the suspension out of my car, or I'm changing the spark plugs, or I'm changing the oil, or whatever. Now it's a case of, where do you want to go? I'll charge the car.
Sorry, with my son, we just bought an old EH Holden that we're going to electrify together. And I got to move it one more time before it goes to the place where the donk comes out and I do the whole conversion. And the fucking fuel pump has broken. And I totally identified with you saying, like, I love working on cars, but I love not working on cars more. Because, like, to fix the fuel pump, to move the car out of the driveway so I can put it back in the garage to electrify it, oh, it's a miserable task.
I think that's the thing that a lot of people maybe who don't have electric cars don't really understand, I think, is that if you have a, petrol or, compression ignition, a diesel engine or a petrol engine, the pistons have to go up and down, and they have to stop at the bottom and stop at the top. And there's just enormous forces involved in all of that stopping and starting. And if you have an electric motor, it just goes round and round and round. And all of that up and downy and all of that heat has to be dealt with somehow. It just makes for a machine that has to get pulled to bits every sort of 200,000 kilometres at least. You have to pull the, do the timing chains, and you've got to have all of the different fluids in it, etc., etc.
If you drive the way you drive, 200,000 Ks might be a thing, but the way I drive, nothing lives in a petrol car. They just don't survive it. I don't call it...
Wait. Wait, you haven't seen Fiona drive. We're going to warn you, Karl.
That's fair. I was thinking in terms of like regular people and how much they might spend on servicing their cars, basically just servicing. Yeah.
So I know both of you well enough to know that you both have Teslas and you're both car enthusiasts, and I'm going to do a whole bunch of assumptions here. I also happen to know that Fiona is a speedway fan, which means driving in circles on a dirt track. I want to know when we can get the two of you out to settle this fight over who's hardest on flogging their Tesla.
I'm quite gentle on my car. I am quite gentle
on a dirt
on
track.
it.
But would you be at Maria Speedway?
This is my most controversial view of the day. I'm dubious about whether electric cars and speedway could go together, partly or mainly because of just the putting the power onto the dirt. I just don't know how that would work.
I do.
Tell me.
I watched a video literally last night on Adam LZ, who's a drifting guy in America. They take the motor out of the back of the Model 3, they put an LSD in it, and they put a center handbrake like you would in a drift car. They take away the traction control, and 20 blokes drive the thing around, and they're all absolutely gobsmacked about how good it is, because we're not trying to operate a turbo engine in a power band with turbo lag and all the rest of it. You just hit the throttle and there's instant torque and instant power. So absolutely, they make great drift cars.
There you go. There's the answer.
My controversial thought for the day is it's going to be okay if we decarbonize 99% of everything.
Oh, you want to keep speedway?
I feel like a monster truck rally, it's nice to hear the 1,200 horsepower burn.
If I was keeping a fossil fuel engine thing going, it would not be monster trucks.
There's still a lot of noise, right? When you fry tyres, there's a lot of noise from frying the tyres. And when you're on speedway, there's a lot of noise from throwing the dirt. So between frying the tyres and throwing dirt and all the rest of it, there's still plenty of theatre. People don't go to the V8 supercars to watch them drive around. We go to the V8 supercars to watch them crash.
Here's a different controversial theory. How about I have an electric speedway car as my curtailment plan to absorb my cheap rooftop solar? So, hey, partner, we've got the big solar on. We're not really getting the value out of it. Why don't you let me finally race speedway? Because I've got all that electricity I've got to burn anyway.
Because she's going to turn around and say, give me a hot tub.
I've got one of those too.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so one of those is great for soaking up energy.
You can't argue against that, can you? You can
Great
never
for
argue
soaking
against
up
that.
energy in summer. They use an enormous amount of power. Swimming pools too. It's just a pity we can't turn the swimming pool off over winter.
Yeah, I think, it's hard to argue against. If somebody says, but it's a speedway car or a hot tub, you're going to lose that one. So.
I'm going to use a heat pump and insulate my hot tub so there's enough energy left over for the... ¿Por qué no los dos? Why not both?
I'm sure it's better for my skin, but I don't bother putting any chemicals in the spa. I fill it up with water from the heat pumps, and then we use it for a day or two, and then I pump it back out onto the lawn or onto the garden, and then no one will use it for a week because people are working and doing things, and then we might fill it up and use it over the weekend. So no chemicals in the water, don't have to keep it hot, and my nature strip looks better than anybody else's.
Yeah, I was going to say the one shortcoming with that plan where we live is that the hot tub fills up with leeches. You get a layer of leeches on the top. So you open the lid and it's like the Muppet Show, They're just singing. And like, if anybody's got any ideas about using it as basically a heat sink, just leeches.
I pump mine out, yeah.
I don't know why it has to be my job to rein you two guys in, because we should...
It should be mine. It should be mine.
You had one job and you...
I know, and I failed abysmally.
Back to the water heaters. All right, so...
Yeah.
Karl, somebody comes to you and says... I really, I watched all those ads from Solar Heart in the 70s. Why don't I get the solar water heater on my roof? Why do I need a heat pump instead of that?
In tropical climates, solar thermal hot water heaters are fine. And at the end of the day, we sell them under our iHeat brand in Western Australia and in Queensland. Where the problem exists for those things into the future is health and safety stuff. So for me to lift that big tank onto the roof and those solar thermal collectors that weigh 60 kilos, I need a proper crane. I need edge protection for guys to get on the roof, or I need harnesses. All of that costs a fortune next to things on the ground. So anytime I put things on the ground, I prefer to put them on the ground than on the roof. And of course, I can do maintenance to them, like replacing anodes and PTR valves and all of those sorts of things. They're not exposed to hail damage. So hail damage is definitely a problem everywhere. It smashes the collectors and you need new ones. That happened in Perth 5 or 6 years ago, took out half the solar thermal systems in half of Perth. The last thing is, if I'm talking about climates like Melbourne, because there's 3.5 times less energy falling out of the sky on your roof, and all of those losses are higher in winter, and I need twice as much water heating to take place. If I've got a tank close coupled on the roof, it thermosiphons, and it'll thermosiphon cold out of the tank as well. So I end up having to heat it with an electric element or with a gas booster for at least 4 months of the year. Some people say, well, my solar thermal system's fine. And you say, dude, you've only one of you in the house and you're showering once every 3 days. That's not a realistic hot water demand. As soon as you put 4 people in the house, it's a problem. The other thing is, I need a temperature differential for it to do any heating. So if I can't get a temperature differential, i.e. greater temperature than what's already in the tank, I can't do any heating. And that's the magic of heat pumps, where I can heat water when it's cold outside. So it can be 0 degrees outside and I can still get a coefficient of performance of 2.2. So 1 kilowatt hour of energy gets me 2.2 kilowatts worth of heat into the water. So I'm still beating gas in terms of emissions. I've got a good chance that I can make that energy myself, and there's no way that I can make it in gas. Bottling farts just isn't a thing.
If this is going to sound like the dumbest question ever, but I'm pretty sure that a lot of people would ask you this question all the time. So I've got PV panels on my roof. This is just imagining. I've got, solar panels on my roof. Is it more worth it for me to have a heat pump in that sort of chain to get to heating water? Like, is that a worthwhile thing to do? I'm already using the solar that falls on my roof to heat my water. Is it worthwhile having a heat pump in that chain, I guess?
Absolutely. So having that heat pump is the most efficient way of heating your water. And anytime someone says to me, I want to spend $200, $300 on a time switch or on a fancy piece of electronics to ramp up and down that element with the available surplus solar, all of that money would have been better spent getting a heat pump that's using 70% less energy in the first place. And you can use that extra energy that you've got for doing any number of other things. And even if you can't use that energy yourself, your neighbour can. I've seen recently people say, now that feed-in tariffs are 0, I'm going to turn off the export from my solar system. I'm like, you selfish bastard, just give it away. I'm happy to give away whatever doesn't cost me anything personally. I'm happy to give it away. Actually, I'm happy to give away stuff to anybody that's less fortunate than I am myself. It's not a difficult thing. It's a nice thing to do as a human being. Everybody loves giving presents.
You could give it to 40,000 leeches.
Yeah, energy is an amazing gift to give people, right? So at the end of the day, if we look at people's standards of living globally, it's entirely directly correlated to how much spare energy they've got.
Beautiful, thank you.
Yeah, if I've got no spare energy, I'm screwed. I can't heat myself. I've got no open fire to sit there and warm myself because I haven't got any energy.
The best climate philanthropy is local, and if you can afford a giant whopping solar system on your roof, you should give your electricity to your neighbours for free.
Absolutely. Yeah, no
Love it.
problem. I'm with a retailer in Victoria called OVO. They give me free energy from 11 till 2. And today, with the weather in Melbourne's been absolutely miserable, I've managed to tap out my network connection at 28.8 kilowatts for 3 hours. So they gave me 90 kilowatt hours for free. And if I've got 90 kilowatt hours or 100 kilowatt hours to give them in summer, they can take it for free. It doesn't worry me in the least. So that's a really, really cheap battery. I give it to them for free. They give it back to me for free in winter. Great deal.
So there'll be a lot of Americans that listen to this. They just must think you're crazy. So how can it, what are you going to say to the Americans that are currently feeling like energy is a disaster and it's all expensive? My house in San Francisco, I was paying 80 cents a kilowatt hour US for electricity because they changed the rules. Like, give the Americans some hope that they can get to hear from there.
Okay, American hope is you can buy solar panels out of China right now for 10 cents a watt. So even if good old Donald puts 100% tariff on a solar panel, it's still 20 cents a watt. That's amazingly cheap. So a 440 watt panel at 20 US cents a watt, $88. I say to people, solar panels are cheaper than putting palings on a fence. It's cheaper to use glass solar panels. They're just so cheap.
The problem is America, has made them expensive. So, yeah, they're 10 or 20 cents a watt. Installed in Australia, it's 55 US cents or about 90 cents a dollar Australian. In the US, I paid $5.80 a watt in San Francisco, more than 10 times as much.
Why?
Regulatory barriers.
Finance is the answer.
No. It's there's the cost of sale is 76 cents per watt because they it's so expensive that it costs you a lot to sell it to someone. The permitting period is between 30 and 90 days. In Australia, the permit happens overnight. You get it in 24 hours, so no one stops you. In the US, most people give up halfway waiting for the permit. They're like, oh, well, this is never going to work. Then there's extra overhead around the labour and insurance and the way they do the jobs. In Australia, the government helped train the people to do the work. That doesn't happen in the US. Okay. So there's not one, but
it's
three or four
overheads,
barriers.
Basically, yeah.
But I do think this is critical. If America wants to get serious about having a cheap energy system, they just got to get on with it and figure this out.
Look, I think Tesla's changing the game over there right now. The Powerwall 3's got 6 trackers, so the argument that you needed lots of different trackers and you needed microinverters on the roof, so the biggest markets for Enphase and Solar Edge have always been America. And if you take away all of that electronic complexity and you say you can just plug them into the inverter that's sitting on the ground, then you can chop out a hell of a lot of cost.
What else do we want to cover?
That cost curve is never ending, decreasing. And the cost of labour is never ending, increasing. So the right time to do solar, of course, was 10 years ago. But for those people that didn't, the right time is still today.
I want to run a solar campaign in the US. Let's get the government off my roof.
The other thing is it's more, we might be cheaper in some ways, but actually housing per square metre is more expensive in Australia than it is in the US. So if you are thinking about buying roof space, which is essentially what you're thinking about, then that is more, maybe that takes us up somewhere close to the US in terms of cost. I don't know. Our houses are very, very expensive.
I don't know what the answer to the cost of the housing is versus America, but I'm sure that they're building crap houses.
I think everyone's building crap houses.
Okay, last bunch of questions. Do we have any rapid fire questions? Favourite electric hobby, Karl?
Oh, it's definitely the Model 3 Performance, the electric 600 horsepower car. There's nothing beats that. If you're feeling down and you get into an electric car that does 0 to 100 in 3 seconds, there's nothing that beats that.
I actually found it good for pain relief from my arthritis. If you do the thrilling thing, the endorphins make the pain go away.
Yeah, I discovered after talking to you that you can get bolt-in roll cages for Teslas. I did not know that exists. You can get aftermarket, like coilovers and all the stuff that you would need to turn your Tesla into a rally car, essentially. Who knew? I didn't know. Anyway, so there we go. We've learnt that.
So you're anti-speedway electric, but you're pro-rally electric, Fiona? WRC electric?
I'm agnostic about the speedway. I think that, part of the beauty of speedway cars is twofold. One of the things that I really love about it is that it's so democratic, and that anyone with any sort of shitbox, that's the aim of it, is these are production vehicles that you could hot up in your driveway and go round and round and round in circles in the mud. And there's something, really fundamentally democratic about that. And the just the lies that people tell each other.
Oh, but democracy's going out of style.
Yeah. It's so egalitarian. I love it.
I think we better wrap up. This has been amazing, and I think we've at least put a few dollars in the swear jar. I forgot to well, get the fuck on with it. Karl, we forgot to ask you the one question. So I'm deeply interested in why people get into this work, into the electrification, into the climate work. Are you doing it ideologically for climate? Are you doing it for the money, for both? Why do what you do?
I'm doing it for my kids.
How old are your kids?
They're 19 and 17, but it's pretty straightforward. A wise man once said to me after I gave a talk in Adelaide as a university guy, and he said, it's pretty straightforward, Karl. All of the carbon dioxide that we put up into the atmosphere today, our grandkids have got to strip back out. And it's very, very hard. The only technology that we've got right now is growing a tree. And a tree over its life, they reckon, sequesters 21 kilograms a year. So if you chop down a 30-year-old tree, it's about 600 kilos of carbon that you can burn over the course of a couple of weeks of winter. But that's a lot. So if we're talking heat pumps, we're talking you need to plant enough trees to offset 3,000 kilograms of emissions every year. That's a lot of trees to plant. It's hard work.
All right, I love it. You're in for the kids and the trees.
Yeah.
That's some good numbers.
Yeah, it's crazy. You can't plant them fast enough. Anyone who's done community, local tree plantings and so on, it's really, really hard work to get them to live. You can put them in the ground and walk away and then come back 6 months later and they're all dead. So it's hard work.
It's a story for another day, but my mum once made me plant about 10,000 trees. And a few thousand are still alive.
That didn't do you any harm, did it?
No, I think every teenager needs to learn how to carry a shovel. All right, with that, thank you.
Thank you. Lovely to meet you. I'll see you on the speedway track.
Thanks, Karl.
See ya.
The Shameless Plug is a podcast supported by Rewiring Australia and Rewiring America. It's hosted by me, Saul Griffith, and my mate Fiona Whitelaw. Our producers are Kathleen Burrows and Caitlin Chang. You can read more about today's guest in my latest book, Plug In, The Electrification Handbook, available in all good bookstores. Rewiring Australia and Rewiring America advocate for climate action you can do today in your home and your community. Let's electrify everything.